Hi, I'm Jana Shalom, and this is Interrupting the Survival Spiral. In these videos, we name survival patterns and myths that many of us were taught to see as personal failure when they're actually collective. This isn't about debate or motivation. It's about clarity. And when patterns are named calmly, the nervous system has more choice. And when choice returns, this is where regulation grows. There's a moment that happens quickly. So quickly that we often don't register it as a moment at all. We notice something, a shift, the way someone's responding to us, maybe a feeling in the body that wasn't there a moment ago, or even a thought that comes into our view. And almost immediately, it begins to feel like something we need to do. We need to do something about this. Noticing becomes our responsibility. There's a rule many of us carry, even unconsciously, and this rule is this: if I notice it, then it must be mine to handle. On today's episode of Interrupting the Survival Spiral, we'll be discussing when noticing turns into responsibility. It doesn't usually sound like a rule. It feels more like common sense, to be honest, like a natural next step. Of course, we would respond. That's the responsible thing to do. Of course, we'll step in because we are naturally helpful people. Of course we will take care of it. Don't worry about it. But in those moments from noticing to responsibility, there is a learning that is occurring. Because at some point, noticing meant that we are now in charge of what happens next. Because awareness wasn't neutral. In environments that expect our movement. Because seeing something often meant it is now ours to carry. It is now ours to hold. It is now ours to nurture, transform, change. So now when something begins to come into view, the body doesn't just register it as organizing around a new concept. The body registers it as a slight shift, a readiness, a preparation, a sense that something now requires our awareness and our care. And our awareness and care springs us straight into action. This can happen even in very small moments. We notice someone's energy shift and something about us leans in. We notice a feeling inside of ourselves and it starts to feel like something we need to figure out, we need to resolve, we need to heal, we need to overcome it. And when we notice something as being unresolved, oftentimes it begins to feel like responsibility. Because simply noticing has never been allowed. Noticing itself is simple, but what follows it is not neutral. Responsibility often arrives very quickly after. And over time, this can create kind of a constant orientation towards looking for what requires my attention right now. What needs my response? Where do I need to step in? Not because everything actually is requiring something from us, but because noticing in the past became linked with our action and our doing. And now it's automatic. So even when something is not being asked, it can feel like something is being asked. And this is where the pattern holds. Not in the noticing, but in the assumption that we must follow it, and we must follow it now with no space. Because when the rule is in place, if I see it, it's mine, then awareness is never just awareness. Awareness becomes a required movement. It becomes an assignment. And that assignment can be quiet, and it doesn't always have to be spoken. It can show up as a quiet pressure, or a sense of obligation, or a moment toward action before we've even allowed a choice to be felt. Over time, this becomes invisible labor. We don't question it. We don't pause when it's happening. We simply move with it time and time and time again. Noticing, then responding, as if they're the same exact thing. But they are not the same thing. And here is a stabilizing truth. Awareness and responsibility are not the same thing. Seeing something does not assign it to us. And not everything we become aware of belongs to us to carry. And this is where something begins to loosen. Not in what we notice, but in what we assume we have to do about what we notice. There can be moments, even small ones, where something is seen and nothing is required to follow. And for many of us, we have to consciously build in this space, the space of no immediate response, no movement towards fixing, no need to take it on as our obligation to figure out. Just our awareness. Noticing and responsibility have been living as the same thing. And when they begin to separate even slightly, there's more room inside the moment where we can now make coherent decisions before we take anything else on. When noticing no longer turns into our immediate responsibility, there is space to sense what is actually ours to carry. And we can make that decision before we begin to move. That's the interruption.